NASA could regain control of the lost Voyager 2 probe after a heartbeat signal was picked up. Contact with the spacecraft launched in 1977.
Launched in 1977, Voyager 2 was built to explore the edges of our solar system, then drift quietly into the dark. But decades later, far beyond the reach of planets, it did something no one expected. It spoke again. The signal it sent back wasn't ordinary data. It carried strange patterns, echoes that didn't belong. Was it just a glitch in an aging machine? Or did the spacecraft brush against something we've never seen before? The question now lingers. Did Voyager 2 just encounter the unknown? Born for the impossible. When Voyager 2 left Earth in August of 1977, no one could have guessed it would still be speaking to us more than 4 decades later, drifting at the edge of the stars. It was not sleek, it was not powerful, and it certainly wasn't designed to outlive generations of its makers. Yet this fragile craft, no bigger than a small car, carried with it the most daring ambition humanity had ever launched, to explore worlds we had only seen as dots of light. Voyager 2's design was humble. Its central computer had less memory than the cheapest digital watch today. Its radio transmitter radiated about the same power as a refrigerator light bulb. By every measure, it looked like a machine destined to fail quietly. But the spacecraft's real strength wasn't in its hardware. It was the idea behind it. Engineers, scientists, and dreamers at NASA knew they had one fleeting chance. Once every 176 years, the giant outer planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, line up just right. A probe launched at the correct moment could slingshot from one to the next, stealing speed from each encounter, making a grand tour of the outer solar system. That was Voyager 2's impossible task. And somehow it worked. The first stop was Jupiter. What had always appeared as a swirling disk through Earth's telescopes suddenly became a world of unimaginable violence. Voyager 2 revealed storms larger than Earth itself, lightning arcs hidden in its bands, and moons that defied every expectation. Io, one of Jupiter's largest satellites, wasn't a frozen rock as astronomers assumed. It was volcanic, alive with eruptions. Europa displayed cracks and ice plains hinting at a buried ocean. For the first time, the idea that life might exist beyond Earth seemed less like science fiction and more like a possibility. Then came Saturn. The probe's cameras and instruments pierced the planet's hazy atmosphere and showed us its intricate, shimmering rings in a detail no one had seen before. It also unveiled Titan's thick orange haze, a moon with chemistry strangely reminiscent of Earth's early days. Every new transmission stretched human imagination a little further. For Voyager 2, there was more. It continued onward while Voyager 1 snapped up after Saturn. Uranus and Neptune remained the only planets visited by spacecraft. Formerly just frigid blue blotches on astronomical maps, these worlds suddenly appeared in brilliant detail set against a darkened backdrop. Tilted sideways, Uranus has its faint rings spinning like a wheel, while Neptune, the most distant giant, boasts supersonic streaming winds with a great dark spot similar to Jupiter's famed storm. Each encounter was more than a photo op. Voyager 2 rewrote textbooks. Its data showed many firsts, such as planetary magnetic fields, strange interactions between moons and atmospheres, and the plethora of objects at the very edge of the solar system. Pictures sent back from the spacecraft adorned the front pages of newspapers around the world, which made many ordinary people stop and stare. For the first time, humanity wasn't just imagining those distant worlds, we were visiting them. The mission planned for Voyager 2 ended just after it left Neptune. Logically, this could be the end of its existence in silence. It went beyond that, beyond all the known planets, beyond the Kuiper Belt, and farther than any machine has ever traveled. In 2018, it crossed the heliopause, the line beyond which the sun's influence over space ends and interstellar space begins. Voyager 2 was, therefore, the second human-manufactured object beyond that protective bubble of our star after Voyager 1. It should have been the last chapter, a dying voice, muffled footsteps toward a slow death. The probe's remarkable endurance became a miracle in itself. Every single data bit still reaching Earth, single bit thirst, ends up traveling for more than 18 hours before making an appearance at a receiving station. It's like a heartbeat from the void, proving that even with a piece of dinosaur hardware, the human urge to reach farther could bend the odds. Voyager 2 was built for impossible things, but no one, not even its creators, could have predicted that decades later, the little craft would stir an even greater mystery, one that might force us to ask whether space itself had been listening all along. The 7-month vanish. For decades, Voyager 2 had been the steady, loyal voice in the dark. Its signal was faint, its power dwindling, but its reliability was uncanny. Then, one day, it stopped. At first, NASA treated the silence as routine. Signals from spacecraft are fragile, and Earth's deep space network, the massive antennas spread across the globe, often undergoes maintenance or adjustments. Engineers reassured themselves the probe was fine. A short interruption, nothing more. But the silence didn't end. Hours became days, and days stretched into weeks. Every scheduled contact passed without a whisper from the spacecraft. No diagnostic pings, no science data, not even the faint background hum that had marked Voyager 2's presence for years. Engineers combed through their logs, scoured their commands, and recalibrated antennas. Nothing. Still, NASA downplayed the situation publicly. They called it a communications disruption, a phrase that sounded temporary, even mundane. But behind closed doors, the mood was shifting. Voyager 2 wasn't just late to report in, it had vanished. The truth was sobering. By this point, the spacecraft was over 12 billion miles from Earth. Its nuclear power source had been running since the late 1970s, producing less electricity each year. Its instruments had been systematically shut down to conserve energy. Its hardware was older than most of the people now operating it. In every practical sense, the mission was already living on borrowed time. Silence was always expected to come one day. Maybe this was it, but the timing was strange. Just before it fell quiet, Voyager 2 had been transmitting unusual readings. Instruments designed to monitor particles and magnetic fields showed fluctuations that didn't fit existing models. It was as though the spacecraft had brushed against an invisible boundary, something dynamic and unsettled beyond the heliopause. The signals weren't errors, they were data, real, baffling data. And then, as if cut off mid-sentence, the transmissions ended. NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab engineers said the silence was eerily quiet. This is because, in many cases, when contact is lost with a spacecraft, the technicians can go out and sweep the sky, trying to focus their antennas on a large patch of space and slowly listen for the faintest trace of signal. This was almost impossible with Voyager 2. The voice of Voyager 2 was already much dimmer than that of a refrigerator bulb trying to push its way across the solar system. If it had veered off even by a slight angle or tilted its antenna just that little bit, then long gone would be that fading signal. In 7 months, after the most distant operating probe ever to be built by humankind had gone silent. 7 months of scientists playing back data, wondering whether they had seen Voyager 2 draw its last labored breath. In that time, the spacecraft had gone from being a tool to a phantom. Was it drifting silently into oblivion while its circuits expired in the cold? Or had something happened which turned it mute? Even amongst engineers taught to rationalize away speculation, whispers began gathering. Had Voyager 2 run into something? Was the sudden absence a mechanical failure or a response? Most of us brushed it aside, but it remained a nagging worry. And then, without warning, Voyager 2 spoke again. It was a day like any other when supposedly mundane commands rained through the cosmic shades. It was just the kind of message that operators transmitted hundreds of times in ritual rather than for anticipation. And then it happened. To the incredulity of all, the spacecraft responded. Not faintly, not partially, immediately. It turned, readied itself, and sent back a complete acknowledgement as though nothing had happened. It was overwhelming relief in mission control. Some cheered, while others just sat mute and listened to the familiar rhythm of the Voyager's voice. Because what Voyager 2 sent back wasn't just normal telemetry, it was something else, something no one had commanded. Echoes in the signal. The return of Voyager 2 should have been simple: a confirmation ping, a diagnostic sweep, then the quiet continuation of its fading mission. But the spacecraft didn't just reawaken, it began speaking in ways no one had ever seen before. At first, the transmissions looked routine: power levels, instrument temperatures, magnetometer readings, the standard stream of telemetry. Then, buried inside the data, engineers noticed something unusual. Subsystems that had been shut down since the late 1980s were suddenly reporting. Dormant instruments, long believed to be permanently inactive, were not only alive but delivering detailed updates. It didn't make sense. Voyager 2 couldn't turn them back on. Commands from Earth had never been sent to reawaken those systems. Yet here they were, humming as if decades of silence had never happened. Then came the real anomaly. The signal carried structure. Instead of transmitting raw numbers and standard formatting, parts of the data appeared recursive, patterns repeating themselves in loops, referencing earlier transmissions. At first, mission engineers thought it was corruption caused by cosmic radiation, but the more they analyzed it, the stranger it looked. The data wasn't broken. It was reorganized. Strings of binary appeared that matched Voyager's original operating code from the 1970s, but restructured, mirrored, and sometimes inverted. Whole sequences of instructions came back as though the spacecraft had taken its own language and rewritten it into a new form. Some frequencies, long abandoned since the early years of the mission, reappeared, carrying layered pulses no one could identify. One analyst described it as Voyager talking to itself but differently, as if it had learned a new dialect. Publicly, NASA had a careful explanation. They suggested the anomalies could be feedback loops caused by cosmic interference. Yet independent analysts studying the signal had a slight tightening of the stomach. The patterns did not seem at all random. They were almost instinctively responsive. It was as if something burst into the Voyager systems, echoed out its data, and slightly altered it, just enough to make a mark. The one detail that most disturbs engineers is the pulse intervals beginning to mimic fragments of the old telemetry from Voyager 1. Yes, not Voyager 2, but Voyager 1, the other spacecraft they put up in 1977, and which is now even farther away from Earth. There was much similarity without being quite exact. Nevertheless, it was too good to be dismissed. It raised the question of why suddenly Voyager 2 would mimic its twin transmissions at a different period and in reverse order. The topic has now turned over to them. Who, or what else, is out there, inside the mission control? Some saw the patterns as no more than machine noise, coincidences layered on decades of degraded hardware. Others whispered darker possibilities. For instance, what if Voyager had not been speaking alone? What if there's been an answering echo for the last 7 months? It didn't just come back, it came back changed. Soon, a classified memo, rewriting monitoring of Voyager 2's signal to a specialized team, was written. Communications were encrypted, access restricted to raw data. The official line remained hopeful. Voyager was back, functioning, and still providing valuable science. But for those who had been privileged to see the strange recursive echoes, it was not so. They began to describe the signal not as data, but as a mirror. And if that was true, then the question shifted again. If Voyager 2 was in a conversation, who or what was on the other side? Edges that push back. For centuries, humanity imagined the edge of the solar system as a line, an invisible border where the sun's influence faded and the stars took over. When Voyager 2 crossed the heliopause in 2018, scientists expected calm, empty void, endless silence. Instead, the spacecraft found turbulence. Its instruments detected shifting magnetic fields, sudden bursts of particles, and pockets of pressure that made no sense. The edge wasn't a boundary at all. It was alive. At first, researchers chalked it up to natural cosmic weather, streams of galactic particles colliding with the solar wind. But the anomalies were too organized, too rhythmic. Magnetic fields bent in repeating intervals, like the beat of an unseen drum. pressure waves pulsed as if coming from something structured, not random. And every time the spacecraft recorded one of these strange fluctuations, its transmissions wavered. Signal strength dipping, code behaving oddly, subsystems flickering. The most disturbing part, several of these anomalies occurred just before Voyager 2 went silent for 7 months. It was as if something on the far side of the heliopause pressed back. Not an object in the way we think of planets or stars, but a force, something shaping the environment with intent. NASA's internal reports used dry technical phrases like localized pressure differentials and non-standard plasma interactions. But behind closed doors, engineers and astrophysicists asked harder questions. What if Voyager 2 hadn't just crossed a natural boundary? What if it had entered a corridor, an area of space stabilized by forces we don't understand? Some proposed gravitational wakes caused by unseen masses drifting in interstellar space. Others whispered about the possibility of an artificial structure, something vast and deliberate, bending space like scaffolding. Whatever may be the explanation, the spacecraft started behaving peculiarly, just like its newfound surroundings. The backup system woke up when nobody ordered it to. Dormant subsystems are activated, almost in response to some stimuli. And the data it sent back so many times repeated the old messages, but then in reverse, as if some long-term memory were being replayed out of sequence. The Voyager team had nothing to offer in terms of an explanation for doomsday behavior. Its systems had been unchanged on paper. In practice, it behaved contrary, like a machine that had suddenly learned something new in the dark. An old-timer engineer put it all very succinctly one day. Space wasn't supposed to react to us, but it did. If this is true, then the heliopause isn't a border at all. It's a threshold, one that tests the boundaries of anything crossing it and marks the end of the solar influence. Voyager 2 became the first human object to realize that deep space is not a passive medium. It gives back, and that realization had a really chilling implication. Take the most cynical view. Every probe, every boat, every whisper we send out into the cosmos is not just observed, it is answered. Not in words, not in pictures, but in the quasi-subliminal shifts in code, in the almost imperceptible breaks in rhythm and cadence of some sort, patterns that feel much less like chance and much more like recognition. There was no question that Voyager 2 experienced an ancient consciousness as something stitched into the very fabric of interstellar space. Voyager wasn't just passing through space, it was being acknowledged by it. And once that line is crossed, there is no going back. After the whisper, when Voyager 2 finally broke its silence, relief swept NASA's control rooms. After 7 long months of absence, the spacecraft's heartbeat signal returned, but along with it came something stranger than anything in its 46 years of flight. At first, the transmission looked routine. Telemetry, acknowledgements, orientation data. Everything seemed almost too perfect, as if the probe had never been gone. Yet, buried in the stream, analysts noticed patterns that didn't fit any known protocol. The most unsettling find was recursive code. Segments looped back on themselves, mirroring Voyager's own instructions, but rewritten in subtle ways. It wasn't noise or corruption. It looked like a reflection, an echo restructured into something new. One engineer called it a whisper hidden in the numbers. Publicly, NASA blamed cosmic radiation or random glitches. Privately, no one believed it. The patterns weren't chaotic. They carried rhythm, symmetry, and intention. And then came the detail that chilled the room. The data seemed to answer back. Commands from Earth were sometimes returned in altered form, as though Voyager wasn't just obeying, but rephrasing. Dormant frequencies suddenly came alive, layered with pulse-like intervals outside any known system behavior. It was as if the silence had changed the machine. Inside mission control, conversations grew tense. Was Voyager still under human command, or had something else touched it? Legacy protocol reactivation and unexpected subsystem feedback were terms invoked by the official report, but in hushed circles, they admitted to some discomfort. One old-timer whispered, "It's like the probe came back, with company." Some argued the Voyager was not sending a signal, but demonstrated effects of having gone through an episode, Like a shell formed by the tide, the code and signal of the Voyager appeared affected by what it had encountered. A darker thought arose. Was Voyager now no longer strictly ours? Was something in its transmissions carrying traces of an interaction we didn't comprehend? Independent researchers from outside NASA kept on pouring through released excerpts. Some reportedly found pitches to resemble a musical scale, while others suggested that the patterns matched a compressed language recursive inhuman. However, the break never reached a consensus. The only thing one could be sure of was that Voyager had not merely resumed contact. It had indeed whispered something back. The universe, in fact, had then not spoken, but instead provided rhythm, a rhythm hidden in static, and that felt intentional. What would follow after the whisper would not be an end, but doubt. Doubt as regards where it went, and what it had crossed, then made silence. Had that silence closed things off, or was it just an invitation? For the moment, something answers back. One question changes, not just whether we're alone, but are we ready for the reply? Voyager 2 may be drifting into silence, but the mystery it left behind is louder than ever. What do you think it really found out there? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss our next story. And before you go, make sure to watch the next video showing on your screen. You won't want to miss it.